Hello, everyone. My name is Marsh, and welcome to my review of the 9th episode of the House of the Dragon TV series. Let's jump into it. So this is going to be a spoiler-filled review, so if you haven't seen the episode yet, go ahead and click off this video right now, watch the episode, and come back, and we'll go ahead and jump into that. In the meantime, I'll give you a few moments to go ahead and do that if you haven't already. And if you like, you can go ahead and subscribe to the channel and like the video, and that'd be greatly appreciated. Let's go ahead and get started though. So I'm going to cover a few pros, a few cons, go into detail on everything, and give you my overall thoughts on the episode. Okay, so starting off with the pro, I just wanted to talk about the structure of the episode. They sort of made this into like a thriller type of episode for the show, if that makes sense. So it was like, let's go ahead. The whole goal is we have these two groups. Everyone's trying to find Aegon, and the tension is basically built around where's Aegon, and also what are we going to do with this secession. So you have Otto's group versus Alicent's group, and the two ways they're going about dealing with the secession and dealing with trying to find Aegon. In terms of the two groups themselves, there's two different political ideas and ways that they're trying to go about handling this. The only reason Alicent is trying to proceed with going the route of a more peaceful secession of the throne is because she heard the last words of King Viserys when he was dying, and basically she misinterpreted them to think that the king was talking about Aegon as the prince who was promised, when really he thought he was talking to Rhaenyra, as we know, but obviously Alicent doesn't know that. There is issues that people have, I know, with the whole prince that was promised thing being brought into this show in general, because it wasn't in the books, and was something that was shoehorned in by George Martin when the show was being made, so it's not something that wasn't approved by him. It was approved, but I know people still dislike it because everyone still has a bit of a sour taste in their mouth. But anyways, going off that though, Alicent's taking the more peaceful, in a sense, approach because she doesn't want to kill Rhaenyra and her whole family and kill all the lords and everyone who doesn't approve, essentially, versus Otto is taking the ruthless approach where he's already been planning this behind the scenes with every single council member. Well, majority of them, not all of them, as we see later in the episode, but he is making his plan. He's doing everything, killing those that oppose and making it so that there's no way anyone can go against the authority of Aegon. This leads me into my next con, which is more of a con in the sense that it is something that wasn't in the books, and that is the prince that was promised. Even as someone who hasn't read the books primarily and watched all of Game of Thrones, the whole prince who was promised thing does have a sour taste in your mouth when you see Game of Thrones. And so them shoehorning it in here in the first place, it was annoying when they did it in the beginning, but the fact that they keep going with it is what's even more annoying, because this whole episode is basically based off that whole prophecy, because she misheard the prophecy from Viserys, and now she's taking that as to, oh, Aegon has to be king now, and that is basically the whole reason for the House of Dragon TV series, and the whole Civil War and Dance of Dragons is basically what they're saying is the prince that was promised prophecy caused everything. And I guess you could say that's part of destiny and how it was supposed to be to eventually go down to Jon and everything, but it's just not something that makes sense. And I guess in the books itself, they can technically do it because it was never mentioned in the books, because it's not something the Maesters would have known about, because it is an unreliable narrator in the Fire and Blood book, where I believe it is a few different narrators, but it's not from the actual perspective of those who would have heard the prophecy. So George can throw it in there because it's not technically mentioned in the books because of who the narrator is. So it's not a non-canonical thing technically if you think about it. I don't know about the Game of Thrones series if it's in there. That's something you could tell me down below. I'm not an expert on the books. Just don't give any crazy spoilers as to Fire and Blood. But I see the annoyance because people don't want to hear that. And it did bother me a little, but we have to move on from it, I guess, because that's what they're going to embrace. And overall, though, they did do other stuff well, so it's okay in the end, for me at least. So just going through the plot of the episode itself in general, we'll go ahead and break down what happened and what I like and dislike overall with it. So it started off, obviously, with the king dying and the secession, we see the small council, and actually really enjoyed the political savviness and all the political maneuverings of the small council when Alicent finds out that they've been doing everything behind her back. I think it's well done. I do love the tension in the room whenever they do these specific scenes. Like, for example, they had the Last Supper from the previous episode, and then they have other political scenes like when Aemon got his eye cut and everyone was in the room. They do tension very well. And so the tension just between Alicent, even though everyone here is trying to help her and what she's trying to do, the fact that they were doing that without her permission in the first place is the main issue. And so that it was done extremely well. We see in the scene, though, later, Criston Cole continues to be crazy and have anger issues, and he yelling at the dude. And the small council member who's saying, we can't do this, this is against the king's wishes, you can't prove that he said this. It's one person's word against everyone. And Criston Cole basically says sit down and shoves his butt back in the sea and accidentally slams his head into the small council ball and impales his head and kills him. And then we see Sir Westerland, the commander of the Kingsguard, throw down his cloak and leave because he is not going to defend someone who is not truly king, and there is no king appointed, and so he's going to leave. Which mirrors Barristan Selmy in a way, if we think about it, with how that happened in Game of Thrones. It was different, obviously, because Game of Thrones, they sent him away, and so, or they tried to force him to retire, and so he just like went to serve Daenerys. But in this episode, they remind me of each other, Barristan and Westerland, and I really liked his nobleness. With the show that has so many politically great characters, it's nice to have one or two that are actually good in a way, or lawful good, if we're going to use that term, because he at least follows the law and wants to follow the law, and he has some sense of nobleness. The rest of the episode turns into a race, though, to find Aegon and secure everything in place. And of course, Aegon goes off, does whatever he does in the in Flea Bottom. Apparently, what he's been doing is having all his bastards as well as other slave children file their nails and their teeth and go into pits and fight to the death in these pits. And it just shows that Aegon is a terrible, terrible person and not fit at all to rule. And we see, obviously, his wife and sister, Helena, I believe it was, or Helena. She's also, like, clueless. She's not going to make a good queen, even though she will be forced to be one. She is obsessed with insects, that's one thing, and kind of, like, crazy, but at least she's, like, innocent in that way. But she's not going to, she's just a pushover. She won't do anything with Aegon when he's king. But they are there, and then this woman approaches Eric and his brother, and they go to him and they say, hey, we know something about the prince, we can show you where they're at. And so that leads them to go to talk with the White Snake, or White Worm. And then we see the other side of thing. Alicent goes to Cole and Aemond, and they go to find Aegon as well as their end, and we find out Aegon took Aemond to like a brothel when he was younger, and basically tried to have him get his willy wet. And once again, just showing the judgment of Aegon and how messed up he is sexually and just in general. Like, we saw obviously that right away in the beginning when we first introduced him through a window masturbating. So he's definitely not fit to rule, and he doesn't want to rule either. He even tries to run away eventually when they do find him, as we'll see later in the episode, which we'll talk about. But that happens. They meet with the White Worm. This is one of the things I don't like about the White Worm specifically. It's kind of like superficial, but I feel like her accent is like really bad. They could have changed it in a way. The thing with accents, even though they are a thing, they are distinct from region to region. If she's been in King's Landing as long as she should adopt some of an accent, or at least her should be changing and not be so prominent, if that makes sense, because usually your accent will change from where you are in your environment. You can ask this to a lot of people who live in other countries and they come to the US or they come to Australia or like some other area and they live there for a long period of time. Their accents do change. And so she's been here for many, many years, since Rhaenyra was like 16 at least with Daemon, and she's been around all these people who don't speak like her anymore, so you think it wouldn't be as strong. That's just more of a superficial thing because I don't like how her accent sounds. It's really bad in my opinion. Anyways, she's apparently some political activist and she wants to stop slavery, which is fine. I mean, it's a noble cause and it makes sense because she was a slave, I believe, growing up. And so she makes a deal with Otto. I'll tell you where Aegon is, in exchange, and then Aemon and Kristen see this, of course, and then they all go to the Sept to get Aegon, which is the last place anyone looks for him because no one expects him to be at the Sept because he's not a religious person, and they all expect him to be at a brothel or a whorehouse or something of that sort. Aegon basically tries running away, though. He doesn't want to be king. He tries to escape, and Aemon holds him down. Kristen fights with one of the Eric brothers. I don't remember their names, so I'm just going to call them the Eric brothers. I think one is Eric and one's another name, but I don't know, so I won't bother. But they do that. They secure Aegon. They bring him back. And Aemon is basically telling him, he's like, I should be the king. And honestly, he should. He should, like, what they should have done, him and Kristen, is kill Aegon, to be honest, and let Aemon secede, because he would have been a better king than Aegon. And I don't know what happens in the lore going forward with Aegon. I know he's probably not the best since he's kind of crazy. And I assume somehow he's going to die and Aemon will secede. I feel like I've seen pictures of like the royal lineage, so we'll see what happens with that. But they go back, they do all that, and we learn a few things. The other thing I didn't like very much about the episode was foot fetish Larry. Like, did they need to throw that in with Larys? I get everyone's messed up in this world, but there's a point where it's like, do you need to show everyone being messed up? Do you need to make them a weird, fetishized, weird, like, person? Yeah, if you're in the feet, you do you. Okay, but, like, do we really need to see him, like, jacking off to the queen's feet in exchange for information? I mean, it makes sense in the terms that she wants to get information, but she's also the queen. I guess that's how she keeps him on her side, in a way. It's all just messed up in this whole messed up world of Westeros. But I guess that's expected in a George Martin book and show. After that, though, he basically tells her that there's a whole spy network around that's being used by other people, and she finds out about that, and she wants to put an end to it, or we think she does. She doesn't, like, specifically say. But they all have him secure, and they're going to go ahead and go through with the coronation of Aegon. And we see a scene where Aegon is going to the coronation with Alicent in the carriage, and she gives him the knife, and he says, "Do you love me?" And she doesn't even say yes, she just says, "You imbecile." And then it cuts off. We can assume she says, "You imbecile, of course I do." And obviously she has to have some love towards her kids, because the whole point is she's trying to do this to keep her family alive and her kids alive. And otherwise she wouldn't bother with any of this. So yes, she does love him. If she didn't, honestly, I feel like she could have told Criston Cole and Aemon to go kill Aegon and let Aemon succeed the throne, because he is obviously the better, like, person to do so if we think about the two of them, the two choices. So she obviously does love her family very much with everything she does to protect them, but it doesn't seem that way because he feels like he's discriminated against by his mother and everyone else. And he really just doesn't want this responsibility. He just wants to run away and not be king. And later in the episode, when he gets coronated, we learn why he feels this way in a sort of way. But along with that, we also have the storyline with Otto, and he basically calls all the lords in and forces them all to bend the knee, otherwise they're dead. He doesn't outright kill all of them, except one of them who pretends to bend the knee and tries to escape, and they catch him, and you see them hanging, and we see that when Rhaenys is taken with one of the Eric brothers, like, to escape, because the Eric brothers can no longer, like, justify all of this, or at least one of them can't justify the actions that are being done, and so they help Rhaenys escape, but then she gets pushed into the crowd, and the crowd is getting pushed towards the dragon pit, I believe it is, and that is basically pushing Rhaenys to what she needs, because she's trying to get on her dragon and escape. They go there, the coronation's happening, Rhaenys sneaks off to her dragon, and all of that, and then they bring Aegon out. They have a interesting scene with the swords and everything, and letting Aegon, who just reminds me of Gerard Way, the singer from My Chemical Romance. Like, whenever I see him, I just think he's Gerard Way with the way he looks, so I might refer to him as Gerard Way in the future, just for fun. But he goes up, he gets coronated, Blackfire, the sword, and then he has, like, the crown of the conquerors and things like that. And one thing I mentioned before, how he asked his mom that if she loves him. This is part of what I wanted to talk about, because we see he doesn't want this, and he doesn't think he can take it, because no one in his life has ever given him any confidence or told him that he can do this. And he doesn't feel like anyone truly does love him, and that's why he can't even tell that his mom loves him, in a sense of a way, because he's never felt loved until the coronation, where they coronate him. He turns around and everyone's cheering for him, and he feels the love of the people. But that doesn't necessarily mean it's going to make him a good king because he feels loved by the people. Now it just puts it in his twisted mind that he is king and he belongs as king, and they love him for that, and he gets to do what he wants when he wants, and he is the law, essentially. That's the way I take it. He finally gets love from the people or someone, but it doesn't mean it's going to make him sane. He's still messed up. And then while he's cheering with the crowd with the sword, like lifting it up, then Rhaenys pops out of the ground and kills a bunch of citizens, and then looks at Alicent and all them. And I do have slight issue with this because, one, she like showed up randomly with armor. They didn't explain. I mean, it makes sense, I guess, if they have the armor stored with the dragons. That's one thing. But I guess they're just trying to make her look more elegant and grand on her dragon. And then two, she could have murdered everyone and done Dracarys and had the whole war done, and that would have been it. So it's kind of stupid that she just goes off, especially if she's just going to go off to Rhaenyra. If you have a chance to kill everyone and have Rhaenyra be the actual heir to the throne, and you can do it and you don't, then if we think about it, Rhaenys is the one at fault for all of the House Dance of Dragons. Not because she started it, but she could have ended it, and she didn't. And so she leaves a message to them, basically leaving, and I don't know, the message, I guess, it can either be interpreted in the way that, oh, we don't need to fight, we can be peaceful about this because she didn't kill them, even though she killed all the citizens and interrupted the whole thing. She could have just flown away without saying anything, I assume. But that's not what happened, and that's either the message, or it's like a supremacy thing where this is war and I want you to see while your whole kingdom burns down kind of thing, I guess. I would lean more towards the first with how they're showing everything, but I don't like how that was executed exactly, and it didn't really make sense just because, not even just politically, but like logically, you can literally just kill everyone there and you have no issues, and you can even take the Iron Throne, your dream that you've dreamed about this whole time and that you've been wanting for your whole life. You can have the throne right there, kill all of them, take control, and say that you're the new Queen Regent of Westeros. That doesn't happen. She flies off to go warn Rhaenyra and all them, and that leads us into the finale for next week. So overall, I thought it was a pretty good episode. I don't think it was my favorite. I don't think it was the worst of the season either. For Game of Thrones, I'd say it's about a 6 or 7 out of 10. That's more average in general, I'm speaking of. On the Game of Thrones scale, maybe a 6. On like average television scale, maybe a 7. But I didn't have too many issues with it. I already spoke of the ones I did have, and there just weren't any like crazy pros with it either. It was very even keeled. And so we'll see what they do with the finale next week with all of that. I have not read the book, so I don't know if they went away from the books for a lot of this. And if so, that could obviously cause frustration for a lot of fans. If that's the case, let me know down below in the comments. Let me know what you thought of the episode overall, though. And if you liked the episode or disliked it, let me know that as well. If you can leave a like and subscribe to my channel, that'd be greatly appreciated so much. But thank you for watching. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye-bye.